Hey guys, it's Yishan here, and I want to welcome you guys to another Programming in Yu-Gi-Oh video. Today is episode 2, where we get started and start to simulate some actual test hands and start to do some calculations and start to do some cool code stuff where we can actually learn about our deck and learn about its consistency. So we've got some really cool coding coming up. If this is your first time here, please consider subscribing if you really like these kinds of videos. They take a lot of work to make. This is already my third take on this video. It's hard to condense this information in a way that's good for you guys. So I really appreciate a subscription. We're almost at 500 subscribers. I don't want to bother you too much, so I want to get straight into the video. But I do want to say that if you have not watched episode 1, I'll link it up right there. You really need to watch episode 1 if you're a new programmer that doesn't know anything about Python. In the first episode, we went over our programming language, which is Python. We learned about how to represent our deck as a list of strings. And so that's what we did in episode 1. If that's all doesn't sound familiar to you, then you probably need to watch that episode. And in that episode, we actually learned how to draw our own test hands. But if you've already watched episode 1, then this is the perfect episode to be on. We're going to be actually doing some cool simulations here. And the deck I've got in front of me is actually a Zodiac Duelist user. I went on Zodiac Duelist and asked people if they wanted me to simulate their deck, and not only did Shinikaru give me a deck of his that he wanted me to simulate, he also told me about this cool tip where you could take any deck on like Yugioh Pro or Dueling Book and take its YDK file and turn it into a nice text file. So basically what you want to do is, he said, okay, go to yugiohprodeck.com. I'll have that link in the description. You need to make an account, and then you want to go deck, submit a deck, right? And then it's going to ask you to fill out a bunch of like categories and stuff. It doesn't matter what you fill out as long as you downloaded your YDK file. And how you can do that in Dueling Book is you can click export deck and save as a YDK file, and then over here you can upload it. Now once you get to this page, you've actually finished uploading your deck. The thing you want to do is you want to click on purchase on TCG Player. This is going to give you a great easy list that is easy to work with as a programmer. It's going to give you the number and then the card name. Okay, and then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to the folder. Now this is important. You want to go to the folder that you're going to write your Python program in. So for example, my Python program is being written in Documents, Programming in Yugioh. It's Programming Yugioh Episode 2. This deck file, which you're going to want to copy and paste this into, is where you want to save this, right? So you see I've copied and pasted in here. Now notice how these are in the same folder, right? Because I've written some code that I want you guys to copy, and remember, my full and complete code will be always in the description below, but I only want you to copy this code up to a certain point, and that's the code that actually loads this deck into a list of strings, right? So I'm going to show you that right now. Remember last time we used idle? You're going to want to open up idle again. Right, that's what we learned about in episode 1. This is our text editor that allows us to edit text. And I want you to copy and paste this section of code that's going to be in the description below into your idle. I don't want you to copy and paste anymore. The rest of the code that's in that description below is just for your reference, but I think this stuff is a little bit hard to append. This is a little bit more advanced programming. You don't need this print deck part, so I'll probably delete that. That won't be in the final code below, but I just want to show you what this does. Was basically we opened the deck.txt as a file, and we read the file and broke it down, and we for each, like for if there was three ash blossoms in that list, we added 3 ash blossoms to the deck. But this is a little bit complicated and maybe beyond a beginner program's knowledge, so I just want to tell you guys to copy and paste the file. I'll show you what it looks like when we run it. Basically, you can see that we've got our entire deck as a string. So this saves a lot of work. We don't have to type out every single deck. And so basically, if you name, like, you can make your own deck, you can call it anything you want. You just have to make sure that this deck and this thing before the .txt file is the same name. So you can do this with any deck, and so I just want to start there. Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's take a look at what Mr. Shinikaru has asked us to do. Okay, and this is where we get into the meat of it. This is the exciting part where we're going to learn how to program a little bit. Okay. Hope you find this helpful. Also, this is my Synchron hand trap heavy deck list. My question would be, what is the probability that in a 5-card hand I open a Doppel Warrior and a Junk Converter plus any tuner for the converter to search Junk Warrior? Okay, So let's try to answer this question. This is a three-part question. He basically, sorry, and he didn't mean to search junk war, by the way, he meant to search junk synchron. So basically how this deck works is if you open junk converter, you can discard this card in one tuner and add a synchron monster to your hand. This means junk synchron. He's going to add junk synchron with junk converter. And then if you have Doppel Warrior, you can, when you normal junk synchron, you can special back a level 2 monster. And then Doppel Warrior, because you special something from your graveyard, you can special this from your hand. And it's just a crazy, crazy, crazy combo. When you start synchroning with this card and doing a lot of stuff. So he wanted to know how consistent this sort of opening hand would be. And so you know what we're going to do? We're going to do that for him. So I'm excited to do that. I know these cards are banned and a little bit changed, but again, we're just trying to learn here, and so it doesn't really matter what cards are legal. I just want to teach you guys how to program a little bit so you can follow along with this tutorial. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do, by the way, guys, and this is for any sort of programming project, is you want to start step by step. And in fact, I'm going to make a note to myself. We're going to start step by step. Step by step, one step at a time, okay? And our first step that we actually need to accomplish, what's the simplest step? Start the simplest. Let's look at his question. It's more like a three-part question. He wants to know if our hand contains a Doppel Warrior, a junk converter, plus any tuner, basically. So what's the easiest thing to do? Just if you don't know anything about programming, what do you think is the easiest to tell if either the Doppel Warrior is in our hand or a junk converter plus a tuner is in our hand? Well, if you guessed just a Doppel Warrior in our hand, you'd be correct because that's pretty easy to do, and I'm going to show you guys how to do this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to set up our thing. So we're going to first, Doppel Warrior is the simplest. So let's start. Okay, I probably didn't spell that right, but who cares? Start with that simplest. Okay, so how we're going to do this is first we're going to want to draw our hand. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to say, hey, okay, we have our deck, right? Our deck's been loaded up. Now, what we can say is we can say our deck equals, or our hand is equivalent to our deck, but not quite because our deck is the whole deck. We just want the first 5 cards. How we say this, last video we said we did deck 0 and then we did deck 1, deck 2, deck 3, deck 4. What we can actually do is we can tell Python, hey, Python, I want everything from the 0th card to everything up to the 5th card. So this will be the 0 first, 0 first, second, third, and 4th card. Remember, we start counting from 0 in programming. Don't forget, we count from 0. This is actually our 5-card opening hand. And if you don't believe me, let's print our hand and see what that looks like. Okay. So we press F5, or you can go run up here. Remember, run module. I pressed F5, and look at this. We got 1 card, 2 card, 3 ashes, and 2 called by the graves. Now you might notice, hey, Yishan, the deck's not shuffled. Now remember, we did learn how to shuffle the deck in episode 1, and if you want a quick reminder, we do that by importing a library called random, and then we call random.shuffle on our deck, right? If you guys remember that from episode 1. So now if we do this again, we can see that we get a random 5-card hand. Now, the question is, how do we tell if Doppel Warrior is in our hand? Okay, so this is where we're going to have to use our logical control flow, and so this is where we start to learn some new stuff. Now, we did go a little bit into if statements in our first hand, but one really, really powerful type of if statement is what I sort of call the and I'm going to scroll down here, is if, give myself some space here, if something in hand. Okay, and so what this in thing does is actually in checks if this thing that you're looking for is in our hand. So for example, if we can take a look at Doppel Warrior. Now, it's important you spell your cards right. Doppel Warrior is spelled like this. Okay, so if we actually say Doppel Warrior is in our hand, we can, oops, so remember I need a quotes on both sides. If Doppel Warrior in hand, print, it's in our hand. So remember, this is how our if statement works. If And this is our condition. So our condition is Doppelweier in our hand? Is the string Doppelweier in our list hand? Remember, our hand is this 5-element list representing the first 5 cards. And we shuffled our deck. So this is actually like a test hand, sort of what we did in the first episode, right? And now we're asking a question of Python. We're saying, hey, is this string Doppelweier any one of these 5 strings? And if it is, we'll say it's in our hand. And if it's not, then it won't execute what's inside the if statement. So that's how if works. So if something is true, right, if this condition is true, it's going to execute everything that's tabbed in from it. If it's not true, it's just going to skip this if statement. So that's how ifs work. Okay, so let's take a look and see if we can test our program. We press F5. We notice that it printed out our hand as we told it to do right here, but there's no Doppelweier in our hand, so it didn't print this part. Now, if we try it again, eventually we'll get a Doppelweier in our hand. So no Doppelweier. Again, I'm just going to keep running this program until we get a Doppelweier in our hand. Look at that. Doppelweier is in our hand. And Junk Converter, Ghost Mourner, Moonlit Chill, Synchron Carrier, Called by the Grave. Okay, so we've got it. Right, and this is our first step. We're almost there. We already did I already forgot his name. So Shinikaru's first condition. The second condition is we want to see if Junk Converter is in our hand. So I want you to pause this video right now and actually just go to your idle. And how would you write an if condition to check if Junk Converter was in your hand? Okay, so pause the video, try your best, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so I hope you're back from pausing the video. If you just want to see how it's done, it's pretty straightforward. If we say if, and then remember, I just like to copy and paste from our text file to make sure we don't mess up the names of our cards, because if you mess up the names, even the case, so I could say, let me just make it down here, card names are case sensitive. Okay, so just copy and paste from your text file. Okay, so if Junk Converter is in our hand, same deal, right? This text is Junk Converter, print JC. Okay, so we're going to print JC in our hand, just as a different print statement. Okay, so that's our first step, guys. We're seeing how we're making these building blocks. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's run this program F5. It says Junk Converter's in our hands. We have Junk Converter, and you can see. Now, if we get a hand where both of these are in our hand, we actually can get something really interesting. But in this hand, we don't have the actual Junk Converter. Now, you may be saying, Yishan. Look at this. We have a tuning in our hand, and tuning, remember, can search any Synchron tuner monster. Reinforcement of the army can search any warrior monster. So if we look at our deck and we say, well, listen, Yishan, this can search a tuner like Jet Synchron or something like that, and Rhoda can search Junk Converter, this hand should have said that basically it technically qualifies as one of our hands. And so now as a program we're starting to realize, well, actually we've got more than just the face value of cards. We have to think about all our searchers and all the different ways that we could satisfy this condition that Shinikaru has given us. And so you have to really think about all the cards that could actually satisfy this condition. Right, so let's take a look at our deck and see what cards can satisfy this Junk Converter condition, and what cards can satisfy this Doppelweier condition. Right, now you notice that Rhoda can search both Doppelweier and Junk Converter. Where tuning can search a extra tuner monster that you can discard. You can search the Jet Synchron or the Cyber Synchron, discard a Junk Converter. So it's important that we take these things into account. And we'll get there soon, but it's important to start thinking of these edge cases, okay, where you've got to try to figure out, you've got to make sure that different combinations of the cards can still satisfy the condition that you're worried about satisfying. Okay, so we've gotten here. Now, let's combine these two if statements, basically. We want to only print this out if Doppelweier and Junk Converter are in our hand. Now, I just said something there. The keyword was and the great thing about Python is it's actually a lot like English. So if we delete this and this, and we make this into one if statement, and we put the and here, what's really interesting is that we can say they're both in our hand. Right, they are both in our hand. So that's what we did. We combined two conditions into one, and so this will only be true if both junk converter is in our hand and doppelware is in our hand. So if only in the case that they're both in our hand that we can print, we'll print this out. Now, if you wanted the case where you say if one or the other is in our hand or both are in our hand, then print this out. We would actually just change this and to an or. Okay, and so it's not doesn't quite read like English, because if you were like an English speaker, you'd say if doppelware and junk converter is in our hand, then print this out. But we have to say if doppelware in hand and junk converter in hand, print this out. Now, one problem with this is you're going to realize is that this is going to take a while before we can actually find a successful thing. So what we're going to actually want to do is we're going to want to do this a bunch of times, right? And so what we're going to do is, let's just say, look, I want to do it, I don't know, let's say 20 times for now, right? And so what we can do is going to say for I in range 20. And this basically means I want to do something 20 times. So range is basically this thing that generates like a thing that just generates numbers from 0 all the way up to the number you say. So 0 through 19 will just be 20 numbers. And what this means is we'll just do this 20 times. Okay, so this is sort of a way to do something 20 times. We can print, what we want to do is we want to put all this inside our for loop because we want to do all of this 20 times, right? So we're going to put all this inside our for loop by tabbing it in one space, and we're going to see if we get a doppelware and a junk converter in our hand. Okay, and so let's see if we can do this. We did it 20 times, and look, we can scroll through our output here. Look, I think I saw it somewhere. They're both in our hand. It says junk synchron, doppelware, junk servant, and junk converter. So look, we got a hand where they were both in our hand. Okay, up here you can also see that we got a hand where they were both in our hand. So you can see how we're starting to write conditions that we're able to actually analyze from our test hands and see what the heck is going on. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And again, you can change this number. So this number, the number in range represents the number of test hands, like that. Right, so isn't that pretty cool? So if we change this to like 5, for example, we'll only do 5 test hands, right? So you'll see that we'll only do 5 test hands. Okay, so let's go back to Shinikaru's request here. Oops, I've been signed out of Dueling Book, no worries. So we also need a doppelware, a junk converter, plus any tuner. Okay. So doppler and junk converter are not tuners, so we need to basically check if something is a tuner. So let's take a look at all the cards that are tuners in our deck, and let's organize them together. So what we can do is we can actually create something called a set, or another list is actually fine too. So actually let's just stick to lists because we don't want to get too complicated. So what we can do is we can actually say, hey, I want to write out a list of things that are tuners. So we can say tuners equals, and it's going to be a list of things, and we're going to see what we get to from here. But first, we want to make sure that we know what is a tuner. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, Ash Blossom enjoys spring. That's a tuner. I know that much. And so this is how we check. I'm going to show you how to check if something is a tuner. So get my next quotes ready. Let's go look. Cyber Synchron, I believe, was a tuner. So we can put this in here, and then let's see, Doppelware Effect Veiler, also a tuner, I believe, so let's put that in here, and then you'll notice that if this starts getting too long, it's no big deal, you can just press enter, and you can continue the list on your next line. Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to actually reload Dueling Book because I just don't want to mess up everything that's not a tuner here. This video is already getting long, but I know these tutorials do tend to take a while because it's pretty complicated stuff, especially if you're a new programmer. So here we go. Shinikaru Junk Doppel. So let's see. I think Flourish Synchron is also a tuner. So let's go ahead and grab that and put it in our code here, floor synchron, boom, my little quotes, paste this in. Okay, floor synchron, I think, what are we missing here? Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, that's another tuner. We've got a lot of tuners in this deck. So here we go. And next one is, let's take a look at our card list. Jet Synchron. Jet Synchron is also a tuner, I believe. So we've got a lot of tuners. It's unlikely that we'll miss on the tuner portion of our thing, but it's possible. So we've got Jet Synchron. Let's see, anything else? Jet Synchron. Junk Converter, I don't think is a tuner. Junk Converter, no, that's just the effect monster. Junk Servant, Junk Synchron, I believe, is a tuner. So Junk Synchron we also have to add here. And the rest of these are just, oh wait, Synchron Carrier. Is Synchron Carrier a tuner? Synchron Carrier is not a tuner. Okay, so I think Junk Synchron is the last tuner, so we get our little quotes. Don't forget those. Paste that in. Okay, so Jet Synchron I believe is our last tuner. Because this is our tuner. And so what you can do is we can say, well actually what we can do is we can say, how do we check if something is if our hand contains a tuner? So what we're actually going to do is we're going to, instead of looping, right now we're looping through, we have to loop through each card in our hand and ask our hand, hey, are you a tuner? Are you a tuner? Are you a tuner? Are you a tuner? Okay, so what we can do is we can say, we're going to do another for loop. So for, and this is the great thing about Python is, a list, if we're going to loop through our list, it would just go one element at a time, right? So we're just going to, what we're going to do is we're going to say for card in hand, which means each time I go through this loop, card will be the next card in our hand list, so the next card in our hand. So if I say if card in tuners, which means what we can infer this meaning, if this card is a tuner, basically what we're saying is if this card is a tuner, print, we can print something. We can say print found a tuner. Oops, and I remember I got to put these in quotes here. Okay, and we print we found a tuner. Okay, so that's what we can do this. Now what we can do is we can test this out and see what happens. So let's see what happens. Boom, we did 5 hands. Look, I found a bunch of tuners in this hand. Found 2 tuners in this hand, the Junk Synchron and the Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Okay. That's excellent. That's excellent. So, great. Now what we can do is we can try to put everything together. We've got to put everything together, okay? First, we're going to ignore search cards. Remember, like I say, it's good to start one step at a time. So we're going to ignore search card first, and then we're going to bring those into the mix after, okay? And then we're almost done here, guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to clean some of this up. So we're going to get ready and we're going to say, okay, if Junk Converter is in our hand, if Doppler is in our hand and Junk Converter is in our hand, and then these are basically our 3 conditions, right? If all of this is true, then we can say that our hand meets this condition, right? That's our goals. We find out that all of these are true, this hand meets this condition. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to still keep printing out the hands, but what we're going to do is we're going to actually say, instead of printing out stuff, we're going to actually set these equal to a Boolean value. So we're going to, I'll show you what it means. And this is say, I'm just going to call this D and JC condition equals true. Now you'll see where I'm going for in a moment here, and I'm going to say if this happens to be true, I'm going to say tuner condition equals true. So what this is happening here is I'm saying, basically we like to call these flags in programming. It says, oh, I found a Doppler and a Junk Converter. Okay, that condition is true. Oh, I found a tuner, raise the flag, that condition is true. And then at the bottom here, if D and JC condition and tuner condition, then we can say print successful hand or something like that, right? So what we're doing here is we're saying we're checking both of these conditions, and if they're true, we're going to print successful hand. Now, I'm going to run this. There's going to be a bug here, but it's a good thing to just to show you guys sort of how this, why this is buggy. Now we say, oh, okay, D and J. So we have to actually define these. So what we're going to actually want to do is we're actually going to want to say, hey, we want to, right, because right now we're defining them inside an if. So sometimes if this doesn't fire, this is not going to be defined. So what we actually want to do is we're going to want to define these out here. So we say D and JC condition. And now what do we want to set this equal to? That's my question for you. Do we want to set it equal to true or false? So I'll let you think about that for a second, and you can pause the video because I'm about to give away the answer. Well, the answer is, and I misspelled this, is you actually want to set it equal to false, and here's why. Right? Okay, so I'm going to do the other condition, tuner condition equals false. Okay, now why do you want to set this equal to false? What, why? Well, the thing is, this is a loop, right? You see we're inside this loop up here. Okay, so if we want to make sure both of these are true before we print a successful hand, right? And the problem with setting these equal to true is that if we set these equal to true, then every time I go through the loop, these will both be true. And if they're both true, no matter what happens here, this will always print true. So you'll always think you'll have a successful hand. So it's important to see we start out as false, and if we find these conditions to be true, we set these flags equal to true. And then at the end, we check to see if all our conditions, our necessary conditions, are true, and then we can say, hey, we had a successful hand. Okay, so let's press F5 here. See if I have to save it, so I have saved it. Okay, let's see what happens. We just printed out 5 hands. Nothing was true. Okay, but maybe if we try again, we'll eventually get a hand that works. So here we go, successful hand. We have a junk converter and a dot war and a tuner to discard. So you can see our program is discerning between hands that don't have this and that do have this. Now this hand would actually work because we have a rota and a tuning, but we haven't gone that far yet, right? Let's take a look at this hand. This one has a doppelwarrior, a tuner, a junk synchron, a synchron carry, and an infinite impermanence, but no synchron. What are we calling this? No junk converter, I mean. So that's why this hand didn't fire. Now you'll also notice that we have a pot of desires to worry about as well, and we'll get there soon. But actually, guys, I want to end this episode here. I think we've gotten far enough for today, and as you can see, we're starting to be able to build these things up to a certain point where we can start actually making some useful deductions, and we haven't quite gone there yet. The next stuff is still pretty advanced. We still got our pot of desires to do. We still got our search cards to do. But as you can see, we're going to get there. And so you can see how you're starting to be able to actually make some reasonable deductions about your deck, and you'll see that next episode we'll be able to turn all these deductions into a mathematical calculation once we get everything working and up to par. Alright guys, I want to thank you guys for watching another programming in Yu-Gi-Oh video. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate your viewership. I know this stuff is hard. It can be hard to follow along. Again, remember my code will always be in the description below for this video. So the code you see right here will be in the description below. Of course, as a link to Yugioh Pro deck, as well as my first video in this series. So I want to thank you guys all for watching. I appreciate it. Thank you to Shinikaru for telling us these cool things and sending in his deck. And until next time, guys, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, comment, and I will see you guys later. Thank you for watching.